Yeah, so my name is Paul McGlynn. I'm the Vice President of Planning for PJM. And I'm going to take you through, give you some background, first of all, of who PJM is and what we do as a regional transmission organization, but then also talk about the energy transition and what that looks like for us at PJM. So if you could go to the next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with PJM, we're based in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
That was easier, I guess. Anyway, we're about a half hour outside, just west of Philadelphia. And we are basically responsible for managing the grid that serves 13 states in the District of Columbia, roughly 65 million customers within PJM. Essentially, we manage the high voltage transmission grid and deliver power to the distribution entities, which then distribute the power to individual customers. So the grid is changing more quickly than it has really in decades. State and federal policies are creating for a pretty rapid influx of renewables. We also have significant load growth in the PJM system right now, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And from the planning perspective, we're always obviously trying to make the grid more resilient for dealing with all of the things that come up as your operated transmission system, from extreme weather events and other things like that. So. At PJM, obviously, our job number one for us is reliability. We understand the importance that electricity plays in everyone's life for the 65 million customers that we serve. We've been doing this actually since 1927. PJM was, I think, the first power pool in the United States when three different companies, the Philadelphia Electric, Pennsylvania Power and Light, and Public Service Electric and Gas, got together thinking, to pool their resources to run the grid more efficiently. And with that, from that very humble beginning, we still plan and operate the system along those lines. We ensure grid reliability through our coordinated operations, as well as our long-term planning efforts, and we use our markets basically to ensure and to incent that our members are doing what we need them to do to support reliable operations. So ensuring reliable operations is not an easy task. It's pretty complex. It includes 24/7, 24/7 operation monitoring of the power system. There's a lot of coordination that goes on with different entities within the RTO, as well as outside with our neighbors. We also use our markets to support reliable operations, and sending people to do what they need to do, not only in real time, but also over the longer term. And then there's obviously, a fairly extensive transmission planning effort as well. It's been about over 20 years now that PJM has had competitive power markets in the United States. We operate primarily three main different markets: an energy market, a capacity market for future capacity, and as well an ancillary service market in real time. The markets we believe help to foster innovation amongst all of our members, and it also amongst and internal to PJM. It helps with to foster innovation and coordination amongst the folks in operations and planning, as well as our markets organization. And if you look at our markets in combination with our operations and our planning, we estimate that we save our customers somewhere on the order of $3 to $4 billion per year again, through different efficiencies of running our markets and the regional planning and just basically efficiencies of scale. So let's get into a little bit of what the energy transition has been looking like in PJM anyhow, and this is just a graphic that shows the average emission rates across PJM for the last several years. We've been managing transitions at PJM for quite a while. There was obviously a pretty significant fuel mix change that started, probably 15 years or so ago with gas, a lot of new gas resources coming online. Obviously with what we're seeing today with a shift to more renewable resources that, those changes are, I would say, accelerating. Today we still have a fairly diverse generation fleet. Gas-fired resources is where we get most of our energy from, I'll say. We still also have a significant nuclear fleet and a fair bit of coal left still, but the amount of coal is certainly decreasing. And then obviously with that, a lot of that is being replaced, and I'll talk more about it on the next couple slides, but a lot of that is being replaced with primarily renewable resources. This graphic is just shows the amount of the dollar value of new transmission that we've put into, invested into the PJM system. Each year we develop a comprehensive RTEP, Regional Transmission Expansion Plan. Last year, our board approved over $6 billion in projects to support the reliability of the system. Many of those projects that contribute to that $6 million are expected to be placed in service between now and 2028. Also, over the last couple of years, we've done a lot. We've produced a number of reports about the energy transition, the most recent work that we've done is really focusing on focuses on how the transition that we're entering into now differs from the transition from coal to gas, with the influx of renewables. Last year, PJM issued a report. We called it the Resource Retirement, Replacement, and Risk Report. We've dubbed it the 4R report. It basically takes a look at what's going on in the PJM, and I'll talk a little bit more about it on some of the subsequent slides, with generation deactivations, with the new resources coming online, and what the timing of all of that looks like and how that may impact overall reliable operations. We definitely have a number of concerns that we've that the reports go into and kind of outline. There were immediate concerns that we had coming out of the winter of 2022-23 with our Winter Storm Elliott, where we had really very poor generation performance. We had on the order of around 46,000 megawatts of generation that was forced offline. It happened to be Christmas Eve morning so it was the morning of the 24th. It was probably the most critical operating period that we've had in PJM in quite a long while. Another report, the 4R report that I mentioned, talks about resource adequacy and what that looks like. And then, we also, kind of looking down the road, have concerns about, as we continue through the energy transition and the amount of and the number of controllable resources, dispatchable resources that we have, as those numbers continue to go down and the amount of renewable resources that continue to increase, essential services will become more and more, important to us. So I'll talk a little bit more about the resource adequacy concerns that we have, and these are just a couple of plots of the load on the PJM system, and the load across the RTO had been relatively flat for a number of years anyhow, after the 2008, 2009 great financial crisis, the load growth within PJM really flattened out pretty significantly anyhow. But now that that is certainly turning around. We're seeing much higher load growth rates across the RTO. If you compare our load forecast from 2022 to the 2023 load forecast and to the most recently issued 2024 load forecast, each year they've been successively and incrementally increasing anyhow, primarily due to a lot of the trends that I'm sure many of you are seeing with electrification and data center load growth is a pretty significant chunk of the load growth that we're seeing. We're expecting somewhere on the order of around 40,000 megawatts increase in load over the next 15 years. If you compare that with what we're looking at from an overall generation retirement perspective, we are forecasting between now and 2030 to have about 40,000 megawatts of generation retire from the PJM system, primarily driven by primarily state and public policy. Although there is also some resources that will likely retire just due to economic reasons. If you think about the resources that are going away, the new resources that are coming online, this is a plot of forecasted new entry into PJM. So these would be resources that would be coming through our interconnection queue. But if you think about the 40,000 megawatts of load growth that we have, 40,000 megawatts of resources that are likely to retire by 2030. I suspect most of you are pretty good at math, but that's not a good math problem to have to try to solve. Basically PJM, we need to interconnect as much new generation as we can onto the system. We do have we have around 40,000 megawatts of generation that has cleared through our interconnection queue. But due to a lot of different reasons, that a lot of it's not actually being built right now. But regardless, if you look at again with the projections that we have in terms of load growth, the deactivations that we're seeing, and the somewhat sluggish, I would say, sluggish new entry and with actual resources interconnecting to the grid. It's certainly problematic from an overall resource adequacy perspective. So some of the things that we've been working on, we've gone through and we've reformed our generation queue. The interconnect, basically the way that we interconnect resources to try to interconnect new resources as quickly as possible. We started an effort back in 2020 to go through and reform the overall process. At that time, we had, if you think about, prior to 2020 and earlier, our queue was dominated primarily with large combined cycle natural gas plants. There were some renewable, some wind resources and things like that were working their way through the queue, but primarily made up of large, 1,000, 1,500, 1,800 megawatt combined cycle plants. Compared to the queue today, where we have it's primarily all renewables and obviously much smaller projects. So we reformed our overall approach to studying projects as they come through the queue. We had a first come first, kind of a first in first out approach to processing the queue requests. We've transitioning to an approach where we're basically going to a first ready, first served approach. And by the end of 2026, we expect to have and we'll have processed somewhere on the order of around 260,000 megawatts of resources through the interconnection queue over the next couple of years. But once those projects go through the queue, whether they actually, then once that 260,000 megawatts are through the queue, whether they actually get built or not is another question. As I mentioned, we do have about 40,000 megawatts that have gone through our queue already, and for whatever reason they're not moving forward and actually being built, whether that be for financing reasons, for supply chain issues, or just siting issues. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think in 2023, we interconnected roughly on the order of around 3,600 megawatts of new resources. And if you think back to the prior slides of looking at our load growth rates and deactivation projections, we're going to need to significantly increase that 3,600 number to probably something 3 to 4 times that anyhow. This graphic is basically what's in our queue today. And again, driven by customer choices against state policy, federal policy. You can see that our interconnection queue is really dominated by renewable resources, solar and storage. And some wind and whatnot, but we expect that trend to actually continue moving forward. So what are some of the key takeaways for us? Well, if the trends that I've talked about continue, electricity demand is actually will eventually outstrip supply. We need to, as we go out and meet with state and federal entities, we're urging them to be cautious about advancing any legislation that could further exacerbate the retirement of the existing fleet that we have. We work with state entities and federal entities to write terms into their policy that enable, if there are identified reliability concerns, that there's a way to, that they can be addressed anyhow through their policy. The other thing is around focusing on what we can do to bring new resources to the system as quickly as possible. Whether that's at the sightings, from a siting perspective, or whatever the case may be, doing what needs to be done to take care of the supply chain backlogs. They're all things that I think as an industry we need to work on anyhow. So if you're interested in learning more about what PJM's doing with the energy transition, you can learn more about it. You can go to our website. We have there's a landing place on our website that talks about what we're doing for the energy transition. Talks about some of the reliability concerns that we have, as well as some of the things that we're trying to what we're trying to do to deal with some of those concerns. I guess with that, I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity to come here today. As you can see, there's a lot of work in front of us that we have. It's an exciting time to be in the industry, to do what we need to do to ensure reliability and resilience of the overall grid. And before I get down, I should thank all of you for what you guys all do day in and day out to help to manage the energy transition into a greener grid. So with that, I'll stop, and if we have time, I'll take questions.
Hello, thank you so much for the presentation. That was great. I'm sorry if I'm going to misrecall some of the numbers here that you put up on the screen, but 20% of the fleet that to be retired, dominated by coal, gas, some other, is I think what I saw up there. Yep. So that's dispatchable fuel. And then the interconnection queue seems to be kind of prevalently intermittent fuel.
Primarily renewables, exactly.
So I feel like that's a reliability problem in the making. So I just don't know how you get away from new gas-fired generation. So if you could maybe just talk about that a little bit.
I think you're spot on. So there's a timing aspect to that too as well, right? Today the vast majority of our fleet is controllable, dispatchable resources. But at some point, as the dispatchable resources go away and the new intermittent resources increase, at some point you're going to get to the point where you're going to have issues. You're going to need different different products perhaps. There's a lot of work and a lot of discussion amongst the stakeholders at PJM on things that we need to do to reform our markets. Do we need different products? A ramping product, for example. What do we need to do with our reserves? Today we have a fairly static approach to reserves. That's not going to keep the lights on in the future when when we will likely need to have additional reserves to deal with intermittency issues and things like that. So I think you're spot on for sure.
Hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think it was a great first step to get rid of first in, first out, and go with first ready. I just would clarify: how does one submit first ready? Like, is there validation? Because obviously you have a queue of 36 gigawatts and they aren't ready. So if I say I'm going to be ready, I mean, how's that? How do you differentiate first in versus first ready, I guess? Primarily
through different milestones. So there's they need to post security, right? So they need to have some skin in the game, put some money up front to say that they, to kind of demonstrate that they're interested in moving forward. Then there's a number of milestones and things that they need to have around site control for the location of where the resource is going to be located, site control for other resources, permits, and things like that. They need to demonstrate, and as they get further through the study process, there's increasing demands on the amount of security, and they have to demonstrate more site control and engineering contracts, things like that throughout the process to demonstrate that they are in fact moving forward.
Question over here.
Oh, sorry, one question here, quickly. Hi, thank you so much for being here. Can PJM comment on how confident you folks are on the materialization of that data center load in particular? I feel that a lot of the decisions around builds and procuring resources and incentivizing resources to come onto the system in order to meet that future demand, if that demand doesn't materialize, it's an interesting kind of outcome.
Yeah. No, it's a great... It's a question that we've received, from quite a few people, anyhow, and I think as in the planning space, we're always, you hear people are like, well, we think your load forecast is a little high, whatever. I think that what's going on with our load growth right now is certainly different. The load growth projections were, in the past, 15 years ago, were based primarily on how the economy was doing, gross domestic product. We had a pretty solid linkage between, how the economy was improving and expanding and what that meant for load growth. The data centers, I think, obviously it's a much smaller. There's fewer players, right? If anything, quite frankly, I think our projections for load growth due to data centers are probably low, at least in our load forecast. We work closely with the transmission owners, because they're the ones who the data center entities come to, saying that they want to that they want to interconnect with the system. But we've also been having a lot of discussions with the Microsofts, Amazons of the world, if any, I'm more concerned that our load forecasts are low rather than being too high.
So, quick question for you. Over here, this side.
There's bright lights, so I can hardly see anybody.
Yeah, this side finally gets to ask a question.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously, data centers is driving a lot of your concerns, but what about the further penetration of rooftop solar and electric vehicle charging? Are you seeing that as also a challenge that the system's going to have to deal with? Or, like, and how are you guys thinking about tackling it?
Yeah, no, both have an impact for sure. Electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging is something that we incorporate into our load forecast each year. We actually used a consultant last year to get a better handle on the amount of electric vehicle load growth that we can expect from electric vehicles over our planning horizon. It's not as big and not as significant as the load that we're expecting from data centers, but it is certainly something that needs to be accounted for. And it also, you need to think about it in terms of, not all electric vehicles are going to have the same type of behavior. The way you might drive a personal vehicle around and the charging characteristics for you and your personal vehicle are going to be different than charging characteristics for fleet vehicles, for example, or school buses or things like that. So, all of that needs to be factored into the load forecasts and actually into the day-to-day operations. Behind the meter solar is also, that is something that continues to expand within PJM. Today it looks like an offset to load to us primarily, but I'm sure you're all familiar with the eclipse that we just had. That if from an operational perspective and a planning perspective, you need to consider it. You need to account for it, and it is a little bit more challenging because it's you have less observability of it, right? Fortunately, though, in PJM we have there's a system that kind of incents people to participate. If you have rooftop solar, there's renewable energy credits that you can get for having rooftop solar, and so there's a system where people tell us about their rooftop solar installation. So that gives us a little bit of a better window into what may be going on in that space. But it is nonetheless something that you for sure need to think about from a planning and operations perspective.
Good morning, Nathan Donahoe from Tennessee Valley Authority. I appreciate your presentation today. On the data center load, and I'm sorry to keep going back here. I know this is probably your third question there.
Yeah, no.
We're seeing some fragmentation across data centers. So kind of old school traditional data centers and then AI data centers and crypto load as well.
Yep.
I was wondering if y'all have made any observations around kind of the fragmentation in those market segments. And then also, geographically, is it concentrated in y'all's service territory in any specific places, and how is that impacting congestion?
Yep, great questions, actually. So yeah, in terms of the types of data centers, you're spot on. We're seeing similar things where you have crypto miners that may behave a certain way. You have other data centers that kind of run flat out all of the time. Then you have other data centers that may be related to and maybe doing AI type of work that their consumption may vary somewhat from over the course of the day. So so there's definitely a fragmentation of them, or I wouldn't say, I don't know if fragmentation is the right word, but there are definitely different types of data center loads out there for sure. On the PJM system, it has historically been concentrated in the Northern Virginia area, just in and around DC, a little bit south of DC, and primarily the Dominion transmission zone. I've heard people say that is the largest concentration of data centers in the world in Northern Virginia, but we're definitely seeing that trend expanding. It's moving further south through the Dominion transmission zone. There's data center development in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, as well Illinois. So it's definitely spreading out, I would say.
Just time for one more. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation and the real transparent conversation about the resource adequacy challenges that are going to be faced. Kind of building onto a question that was asked earlier about that gas-fired generation and the consistency and the stability of it. Is there any consideration on the renewable side towards renewable natural gas, towards landfills, wastewater treatment plants, food stock, things of that nature, as kind of a compromise or a marriage between still having that stability of gas fire while having a renewable or even hydrogen for that matter?
Yeah, so in terms of landfill gas, we have landfill gas resources on our system today. The concentration of them, the amount of megawatts that we get from them is pretty small, though, in comparison to the overall, overall size of the grid. There is a lot of work going on with hydrogen, hydrogen hubs, co-firing. A number of our newer combined cycle gas plants have been designed and tested to also burn hydrogen. So the idea is that, if there's significant amounts of renewables, that we could use the energy from some of those renewables to help with the production of hydrogen, and then use the hydrogen to then co-fire, co-fire other thermal resources. Most folks are talking about it using with combined cycle gas plants, but there is even some talk about co-firing and using hydrogen to co-fire old coal plants as well. So more to follow, but again, we'll need to significantly step up the hydrogen production before that is really viable, able to be done viably across the system.